Today we are celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month by celebrating Latin women. Celebrando Mujeres Latinas.
Very good.
Thanks. That was my semester in
I'm
Spain.
impressed.
No, thanks. And so we are the Rutgers Center for Women in Business. What we do is through education, opportunity, and thought leadership, we remove barriers, build community, and empower women with the confidence and skills to succeed as business leaders. I am beyond grateful today for many different reasons to have me joined by Maria Montaño. Maria happens to be a good friend of mine. And in addition to that, she is an amazing woman. She is the daughter of Mexican immigrant field workers. She's a first-generation college graduate. She is the current CEO and president of Gerber Childrenswear and has had leadership roles, which means she's run and been the president or CEO of major companies or divisions of those companies like Britax, Nike, Bugaboo, and Univision. She is a focused operator and driver of profitable growth. And how she's able to do that is because she has a consumer first passion that she's gotten through hands-on experience managing these global brands. She also has a deep and personal passion for gender and diversity issues and took a year at Nike to transition from her operating role to serve full-time on their diversity and inclusion team, again, with the objective to improve operational results. She is a founding board member of our Center for Women in Business at Rutgers Business School and a member of the Latino Corporate Directors Association. She has mentored hundreds of women focused on first generation to share her experiences and shine a light on that example to realize that you can do it too. We're grateful to have her as one of our outstanding mentors in our Women Grow mid-career group mentoring program. And so with that, Maria, again, thank you for being here.
Thank you. It always sounds so much better when somebody else says all of that.
It's hard to toot our own horns, but you deserve it. So I just rattled off some of your bio, and of course we only have an hour, and I want you to talk, not me. So I wish I could tell them even more. But tell us a little bit about yourself that we can't read in a bio or see on LinkedIn.
Sure. And I love that question because there is so much more that all of us bring to the table that's not readily apparent in your bio or on your LinkedIn profile, right? And so for me, first and foremost, I'm the proud mother of two amazing young men. But to go a click deeper, and in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, as you referenced, like, just a deep part of who I am is a daughter of immigrants who came to the U.S. with a fifth and sixth grade education and worked in the fields my whole life. And so, that is, for some, may be viewed as a disadvantaged background, but for me, there's so much richness that came from that, and so much that I learned from growing up in this world.
No, I think that's so important. And one of the things that I really want us to emphasize is, yes, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, but we don't believe in performative activism, and you don't honor Hispanic or Latinx folks just between September 15th and October 15th. Maria, you happen to be the daughter of Mexican field workers, but you are first and foremost Maria and the CEO of this major corporation. And I don't want to underscore that as well. Maria, you also have some pretty varied experiences, starting out with the government in the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency and Department of Treasury. Can you tell us, did you plan out your career path?
No. I did not have a grand plan per se, right? And I think I do have some varied experience. And if you think about it, it's really characterized by a thread that I determined pretty early on, actually in business school, solidified, which is, all of work involves, there are days when it's tough, right? That's the nature of work. So what I realized was important to me is I had to have a passion for whatever product or service that company that I worked for delivered. And so that's been my thread. And when I graduated from business school, it was a time when a lot of my peers were going into banking or consulting, and I went to Univision, Spanish language television, and I ended up running Spanish language TV stations. And it was such an amazing, wonderful experience. And again, it was fueled by this passion of I really believed and cared for what we did. And that thread has been continuous and continues with me today at Gerber Childrenswear. I love what we do. I love what we deliver.
I think that's really important. And I think our work experiences help define what our leadership style ultimately is going to be.
Sure.
But you tell this amazing story from your childhood as well that really defines your work ethic. And you told me the story about your dad in the fields with the irrigation. Can you tell the rest of our folks a little bit about that?
And first of all, let me preface of, going back to my childhood and this environment that I grew up in. I feel like very fortunate to have, although, we didn't have a lot materially, and there was certainly a lot of stress. I feel fortunate to be the daughter of two amazing people who taught us children to view the world from a lens of what is possible. And that working hard, understanding what's possible, and then working hard to achieve that, you could go very far. So, let me preface it with that. But the story, it was, it's about how when you're a child, how you how you have leadership lessons that you're not even aware that you're soaking in at the time. So my father worked in the fields, and he would occasionally sometimes have to go back. He'd come home for dinner, and there were some times that he had to go back to the fields and check the irrigation. And so we kids would tag along, not because he asked us or he was like, I'm going to teach you a life lesson. It was, we just wanted to hang around with our dad a little more. And I think of that as an adult and as a leader, because this was something, one of the truisms I think of agriculture is, there aren't real shortcuts. Like you plant the seed, you nurture it, and you wait for it to grow. And yes, you can be more efficient, but there aren't true shortcuts. And so this amazing leadership lesson that kind of sunk into my pores was that a company is like an organism, is like a plant that you have to nurture and grow and take the time. And so I'm definitely a person who's always looking for the long term and the long term health, and how do you appropriately nurture this organization or organism. And it's kind of wild when I connect it to this lesson of watching my father going to do what was right, which was make sure that the plants were being irrigated when no one was asking him to and no one was watching.
So I think that's really important. And I think especially as we start out in our careers, it's hard to know what we're supposed to actually do, right?
Yeah.
And we're kind of waiting for folks to tell us what to do. And even as we grow throughout our careers, I think that lesson about the irrigation, no one told your dad to check to make sure the plants were getting, the fields were getting watered, but he knew that was the right thing to do. And I think we have to keep remembering to do more than what is in our defined role. And that's how we're going to excel within our own careers, right?
For sure. And to have that, I think the confidence to know and the instincts to follow that, because as a first generation American, but also first generation college graduate, something you and I have talked about is there isn't always, for us first generation college graduates, there isn't always a roadmap or an example of how to behave in the business world, and to know that you can take that initiative and rely on your gut. That's really important for people to know.
No, I think that's critical. I think it's shedding that imposter syndrome. One of the things that we've talked about before is sometimes when we go into a situation, we are the only one who looks like us in the room, right? And how do we handle that? And sometimes we're bringing in our own perceptions of how people are going to view us, and sometimes there are real ways that people view us, how we don't view ourselves. So first, can you share an experience where you felt that your gender and or ethnicity was actually a non-issue in a setting where it typically is?
Yeah, and I think it's actually more the case than not for me. I because um, when you go in where it's not an issue is I'll bring it back to business. You know, when you go into a meeting and you're talking about a business issue and focused on that, and the business issue doesn't have a gender or an identity, right? It's and therefore I'm not thinking of anything but that, and where my gender or identity doesn't is not an issue is when it's not an issue for anyone else, right? When we're focused on a business problem, and that I think one of the sayings is attack the problem, not the people. So if we're
Yep.
like attacking a problem together, then these other things, yes, you can't escape being a woman, or I can't escape being a nor would I want to. Um, that's not the issue. It's the business challenge that you're talking about.
Right. No, I think that's really important to realize. And then on the flip side, unfortunately, not everyone's coming into that meeting or that situation in that same frame of mind. And when I think of you, Maria, I think of you first of all as my friend, but then secondarily as this amazing executive who's CEO of this really big company, Gerber Childrenswear. Oh, and by the way, you happen to be a woman. And oh, and by the way, you happen to be Hispanic. Not everybody comes in with that mindset, right?
Mhm.
And so, can you talk about one of the challenges you faced as a Latina in your career, and what did you do, to overcome that yourself and also outwardly with others?
Sure. And yeah, not it. I think one of the challenges that as a Latina I have faced in the past has been yes, I'm passionate, maybe true to a stereotype. I love a good debate. I'm very passionate. And there have been instances where that is perceived as emotional. I have been in a male dominated environment where I was coached on my voice in a way that was a nice way of saying maybe you're a little too outspoken, a little too aggressive, and I hadn't seen any men coached on that, given coaching on.
What does that even mean?
Again, I think
Your
it was
voice.
at the time it was code for being a little too aggressive or outspoken, maybe passionate. So how you deal with that, and again, I'm pretty transparent. At the time, honestly, this is way back when I overcorrected. I overcorrected. I watched myself, and I really, tried to fit into that particular environment and tone down who I was, but too much so. And there's really a balance, and that I think comes over time of understanding that's part. Everybody has this, like, it's part of like your vibrant self, and how do you bring yourself to the table while also acknowledging and respecting whatever environment you're in. And over time I've learned to balance that.
No, and I think that's such an important point. And I've been accused of being emotional, or because I'm really passionate about things, right? And there are all those biases associated with this. But I think really importantly, what you're saying is, adjusting. An extreme version of that is code switching, right? Where you're not yourself, and then you know
Yeah.
you're not going to function as well. But
Yeah.
what is that balance? Like you said, you figured out that balance, right?
Yeah,
And you've given an
yeah.
example. How do you come to work that, yep, you have to be yourself or else you're not going to produce your best product. But at the same time, understanding, how did you build that intelligence? Maybe it's just maturity. How did you gain that
Yeah.
to know
It's
how to weave that?
trial and error, right? But and I liken it to a, a a suit, right? Like if you're if you're trying to be someone completely different because you think that's the right thing to be, it's like wearing a suit made for someone else or clothing made, it's just not going to fit right. So over time, you learn to tailor it to you. And I think about this because there's definitely the sense of bring your true self, right? But if we think about this, everybody adjusts depending on the situation. I'm a mother, and who I am as a mother, like when my kids were young, I was, a little more dialed up, that protective, making sure they weren't, sticking forks in the light switch. And that's a different aspect of myself than when I'm hanging out with my girlfriends from college and maybe we're being silly and giggling. So you naturally dial up and down these different aspects of yourself. I think as a and I'm a big believer that your obstacles are actually your strength and your superpower over
Yeah.
time. And so as somebody who grew up in a household where we spoke Spanish, when we walked out the door, it was English and we were in an English language world. So it was embedded in us to live in two different worlds. And that although it's difficult, those of us who have that experience, that multicultural experience, you actually find that you have this muscle that you've exercised over time, and if you just listen to that intuition, you can adapt, to the environment in a way that's still true to yourself.
And did you always have, like looking back, right? And you probably don't even realize it as you're going through, but did you always have that intuition, or was it almost like exercise? You had to practice, and were there certain techniques or interventions, that hacks, as our kids would call them, right? That you discovered that worked better?
Um, I think this is where mentoring, feedback, and coaching is really important because no, it's not necessarily intuitive. And, another story I shared with you in one of our conversations, Lisa, was, being a first generation college graduate, I didn't have a roadmap for how to behave in the professional world. Per
Right.
se. And I think I laugh, it sounds funny, but I probably modeled, a lot of my behavior on maybe what I saw on TV or in a movie. And I had this impression that, when you're in the office in a business meeting, like you had to be really serious. You couldn't let your hair down, so to speak, and laugh and be natural. And I had a boss who said, who said to me after a meeting, it's like, you're laughing, you're smiling, you come into the meeting and it's like you're a whole different person. And it wasn't in oh, smile, be a nice woman. It was, he recognized that there were two different people. And it was that mentoring that was really important because he noticed that I was code switching and putting on, a different suit, so to speak. And once he said that, it was just the practice, like, okay, that gave me the permission to be myself a little more. So it's really important if as peers, as leaders, if we see somebody kind of maybe being who we know, trying to be something they're not, help them along, point it out, like maybe they don't know.
I think that's really important and amazing that somebody saw that and knew you well enough to tell you that, hey, you're not you. Like, who are you trying to be?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, I like this other Maria better. Like she's fine too, but she's really serious.
Right,
You know?
right. And I think the other one's going to perform better at work if she could just
Yeah,
be her
yeah.
natural self.
And that's what's amazing is when you are your natural self, you do perform better because you're not using that mental energy to try to be something else. You're using your mental energy to focus on the business. And if people, if you can relax and let yourself be that who you are, you can focus on whatever the bigger challenge is.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I think that's such a great segue into our next set of questions, which is advice. So you just talked to us about mentoring, but can you share the best advice? And you do a lot of this, which is so important. There's a whole campaign going around. I don't know if you know about it, or those of us that are listening, about That Little Girl Was Me, in celebration of International Day of the Girl. And so we get the privilege because we get this amazing woman, Maria, who's not just posting something on social media, but we get to hear from you, right? This little girl was me. So what's the best advice that you would give to that little girl when you were starting your career?
Ooh, okay. I think the best advice that I would give to the younger me, or to the little girl, right, is listen to your gut. And I think this applies to all of us, right? You have great intuition. And there's this notion of you deserve your seat at the table, or you've earned your seat at the table, and absolutely yes. But I think I would layer on to that, and say you bring value by being at the table. Not just like you've earned your seat, like you bring value. Your unique perspective, your unique voice brings value, and that's why you're there. And that applies to all of us. We're all, when we're sitting at the table, when we're in the room, we're there for a reason, and just remembering that. So yeah, there's a lot I would tell little Maria, but that would be one of the top ones.
No, and I tell that to my students all the time. Nobody's hiring you as a token, because nobody has money in their P&L in their budget to do that. They're hiring you because you're smart and they think you're going to add value to the company. And you might have some other experiences that could bring a unique perspective. But
that's another piece of advice that actually, on that note, participating in the GROW program, which if anybody is interested, it's a wonderful program for mentoring mid-career women that I participate in. And one of the women in my cohort made mention of a new position, and it was wonderful for me to say to her exactly that, because I realized, first of all, in answering that I've spent a lot of time just feeling lucky and grateful, and I am lucky and I am grateful, like, oh wow, I got this opportunity, I'm so lucky, and that person's so nice. But when it was flipped and I had to talk to someone about that, the feeling of being lucky or maybe an imposter, I thought, well, I've given a lot of jobs and promotions over the years. It was never a mistake. It is never a mistake, because you never say, oh, Sally's nice and boy, not prepared, but I'm going to go ahead and risk the business to give, Sally that job. No, you never do. There's always a very, very good reason for you to receive that promotion, that new job offer, that person who is extending that, or the organization, sees qualities in you. Now, nothing's 100%, right? But you have to believe and know that it's there for a reason. It's not a mistake.
No, I can't agree with that anymore already. And it's true. There's a statistic out there. There was a study that was done. Women apply for a job only if they meet 100% of the criteria, and men will apply if they're saying, I got 60% of this covered. And so, no, based on what you told your mentee as well, go for it. You don't have to check every single box, because nobody else is going to check every single box.
Exactly. And have faith in your ability to adapt and to learn, because guess what? Especially, it's accelerated in today's world. Whatever position you start at, I guarantee, like in 6 months, it's going to be different, because the world will have changed, and what's required of you on the day-to-day will have will have changed and evolved. So really the most important thing, yes, you have to have kind of a foundation of knowledge in the area, but if you're a person who can adapt and grow, like that's what's important. And having faith in that, having faith that you'll learn and adapt and grow.
No, I think that's critical. We have another question in the chat that came up about what do you recommend folks learn first when they're starting out their career? Is there a certain skill or an attitude or a mentality? Like what should we do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think and I'm just going to be very high level here, in terms of skill, is that adaptability, and to drill down a little more, curiosity, asking why. Don't be afraid to ask why several times, and really understand. If you're starting out, like, understand the organization's goals, understand how your function, your department, contributes, but also taking the time to figure out what other departments or areas of the organization, why do they do what they do, and how do they serve the purpose of the organization as well. Just that curiosity makes you very nimble. In fact, another thing I would tell my younger self, that came up with my grow group as well, was, getting, I think in any organization, there's always, maybe you want to do something and there's maybe another department or person who, kind of puts a stop on that. And I mentioned that I wish, as my younger self, instead of like being irritated, like, oh, I want to do A, but so-and-so is telling me I can't, why I wasn't more curious and to sit down with them and figure out why, because usually there's a good reason that they're coming from, why, that might not be the best thing to do. And if you take that time to just be curious, if you feel like you're being limited, and find out why, you'll learn more, and you'll probably make a good connection with someone that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise.
I think that's so important. One of the things that we try to instill in our own kids is that intellectual curiosity. It's something I want them to grow up having. And then even in the classroom, I tell that to my students all the time. I want you to act like 4-year-olds. Why? Why? The first 3 to 6 months on your job, you're supposed to have a brain and you're supposed to think, but you're not supposed to know how the company operates or what the process is or what's supposed to come next. That is your window to ask anything.
Right. And I think there's a bit of confidence, and it sounds ironic, but like there's a bit of there's confidence in being okay to admit you don't know anything. And I definitely have always been the person who's like, I'm not coming down with the tablets from the mountain telling you what to do. I think you had referenced one of the things I'd said previously is like, if you're coming in with all the answers, wow, that's a shame, because you're not tapping in to the strength, the experience, the wisdom of what your team has to offer. And
that is so powerful. And I didn't say that. You've said that. And I love it. So I wanted to pause for a second and just have you repeat that, because I think it's really important as a leader.
Yeah. It's that if you're coming in with all the answers, you're not tapping into the strengths, the experience, the wisdom of what your team has to offer. They're there for a reason. They're there for everyone is there for a reason, right? Everyone has experience and perspective, and to come in and just give an answer is, I think we are going back to how you model things. I think in the movies or whatever, the leader comes in with the answer and like, tells people what to do. And now I see that as an adult, and I think, well, why aren't they asking, why aren't they getting a bigger, broader perspective?
Right. And I even take it one step further and say that first time, and I'm sure you remember it as well, when all of a sudden everyone's looking around that room and we're trying to figure out what the answer is, and you notice it's that oh crap moment, and everyone's looking at you, and you realize, oh my gosh, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the right answer is, but I've got to make a decision. And in that moment, I felt it. I don't know if you felt it. I realized, you know what? The CEO of a Fortune 500 company probably doesn't have a clue what the exact right answer is most of the time. And it was such a liberating feeling and such a weight off the shoulders. You just have to make a decision. And it could be wrong, but at least it's not indecision because you're moving forward and you can always course correct. Have you had one of those experiences? As many experiences.
Often, because you come to the realization. Well, first of all, as you grow in leadership, what one of the other things I say is like, if it was easy, it wouldn't come to my desk, right? Like, so as you grow in leadership, you're going to get inherently trickier problems again, because if it's easier, it gets solved further down the organization, and as you get those trickier problems, you do realize there isn't a right answer. And the best you can do is take calculated risks, right? There's no 100% guarantee. Nothing's going to be 100% right. You just, weigh what you have. And again, there's comfort in knowing biggest CEOs of the biggest companies, they're taking calculated risks. They don't know the 100% the answer.
Yeah, I think that's so critical, and so liberating too, as a leader, to finally realize that you don't have to know all the answers. I love what you said too about tapping into your team strengths as well. I can imagine, I've never worked on Maria's team in a corporate setting, but I can imagine just how inspirational and powerful you are as a leader, because the best leaders are the ones who want their people on their team to ultimately replace them. And I think that's you in a nutshell. Let's stick with advice. What is the best advice that you've ever gotten?
Well, as you reference, like imagining being on a team with me, I can be hard charging and type A. So the best advice I've ever received was from a dear leader several years ago, and she noticed, I'm a bit of a hard charger, and so she shared with me the Maya Angelou quote that people will forget what you said, and people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And it's something I aspire to. I'm not perfect, but I find I'm a far better leader when I take the time, because you have a lot of tough conversations you have to have in a lot of tough situations. When I take the time to remember that quote and be thoughtful of how I'm making people feel, it works out much better for everyone.
That's so important, because those feelings, those stories are going to stay with us much longer than the actual action of the event that happened. Another question in the chat, as we're talking about, advice and whatnot. And I know you are an avid reader. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to others?
Well, I am an avid reader. Come to me for sci-fi recommendations too, but no, this isn't quite that forum. But I think for women, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office is a huge recommendation of mine. And I'm taking that from Pat Davis, who was my co-lead in the first Grow mentoring group. It's an excellent read. And then another one that I've personally loved is for starting any new position is a book called You're in Charge Now What? And it's basically the difference. It made such a huge difference for me in how I approach any new role. It gives you a nice roadmap, but it helps you to be really thoughtful of the questions you're asking and taking advantage of that time you mentioned, Lisa, that first 3 to 6 months to to really approach it in a way that's going to be most beneficial for you and everyone around you. So those are my two favorites.
Thank you. No, I think those are great. They're on my list now as well. Another question that just came in, as you're growing as a leader and developing, how do you continue to be flexible to adapt your leadership style as you're steering a ship, and especially during this pandemic?
Yeah. I think the most important thing there and is to, you have to know and be aware of what people's different needs are for them to be effective, right? So if you go a click deeper as a leader, and it's a muscle that we all need to exercise, is, are you making it safe and comfortable for people to express that, like express their needs? Because it's very easy to go along and think everything's fine, but if if you have like an aura or a bubble of intimidation around you, no one's really going to tell you what the issue is. So I think that's something that takes a lot of practice.
No, that's true. And you probably, I know, even for myself, like, don't realize the position that you're in, and that it could be scary to
Sure.
some folks.
Sure.
Right?
I always tell the story, actually, of early on in my career. I had come into the office. This was when I was at Univision, actually. I'd come into the office, and I just, for some reason, I need a lot of coffee in the morning. I do. And I had not had my caffeine. So I just walked in, and I must have had this aura of like crankiness or and I just closed my door and I drank my coffee, and I thought nothing of it because I was just in a groggy state of mind. Well, there's a knock on my door an hour into the morning, and somebody comes in and is like, everything okay? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we're all worried, and I was like, oh, I just didn't have my coffee. But I did. The story is a little funny of a story, but the lesson there is, as a leader, you walk in that particular instance, it was me walking in, just not caffeinated enough, and not even saying anything to anyone. And just that act, got people nervous. So you really have to be conscientious of how even the small things can impact people around you.
Yeah. Let's stay on that for 1 second. You and I have talked about this before. We love a good spirited debate and don't even realize how sometimes how folks are reacting. Can you just talk for a second about, in a business environment, just the concept of debate? I know a lot of women don't like conflict. Mm-hmm. And can you just talk a little bit about that, about the productivity, about the impact, and how to see that, how to get comfortable with the conflict? Because it's in business. Yeah. If you're not.
Sure. I mean, first of all, again, I think the important thing is being comfortable with debating the problem, because that's fun, right? And learning as a leader to keep it focused on the issue and not the person delivering it. Right. And I think that's where, when you talk about people being uncomfortable with conflict, I always think that somehow then it's being translated to the people delivering the message or debating it. When you are able to focus it on kind of attacking the issue, then it's fun, right? Attacking the messenger, not so fun for anyone. So yeah, that's what I try to remember to do.
And I think that's important. I think as we're in the middle of this, especially for those of us that don't like conflict, to come in with the presumption that we're debating the issue, they're not attacking me necessarily. They might be attacking the issue, and maybe that can help frame our mind as well, that it's not us, it's let's have this healthy debate, because I, like you, agree that we always come out better if we ended up with everybody thinking the same thing, I don't think the companies would run.
And that's a little scary to me, to be honest, when everybody's agreeing. And I do, I love it if somebody can, poke a hole in something I said, right? Because you're really looking at it from a different angle, and you have to model that, right? Being the recipient of it to set the culture. But it is, as a leader, I hope any leader is a little afraid if everyone's agreeing too quickly.
Yeah.
You really have to, beat an idea up to make sure that it's robust enough.
And do you have any idea, not ideas, ooh, my sound is all funky. Do you have any suggestions on how to get your team even more comfortable with that debate, or to give you that honest feedback where they're not scared they're going to be, consequences for that healthy discussion? Because some folks are afraid that if they challenge their boss, they're fired.
Yeah.
So how have you, and as somebody who you've self-described as sometimes intimidating, what have you done, or what have you said?
Yeah. I mean, I think you asking the question is a good one, because it just reminds me that I do say it occasionally, but I think it's best to say it consistently. Like, poke holes in this, or what's the other point of view? As a leader, to be consistent in saying, okay, what's the other point of view, and pulling that out is something that you should do, and I could do more to give that safe space.
That's helpful.
Otherwise, I can debate against myself, but then that would scare everyone.
No, totally. No, I think that's really important. And then let's go back to your leadership and during COVID-19. What have been the most critical actions that you've made as a leader to help support your team during this I don't even want to use the word unprecedented time, but during this pandemic?
Yeah, I think one thing that I think is important, and that I know I need to extend the circle of what I do, is, just checking in as a leader, and referencing back, to what we spoke about earlier, making it safe for people if it's not okay for them to say it's not okay, and to express what they need. And I think it's important, like I said, in my circumstance, to extend the circle of people that you do that check-in with.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really important. One more, I'm going to digress and go backwards for a second, because you talked a lot about mentorship. And if somebody's looking for a mentor, right, how do they go about finding a mentor? You're not asking someone to go out with you, right? Like, do you want to be my boyfriend or my girlfriend? But how do you go about finding someone who can be a mentor, or even a sponsor, right? Can actually be even more than just giving me advice, but can go to bat for me. How would I start that?
Sure. I think it goes back to being curious, well, let me go further back, actually. First of all, just ask, right? Ask for time. And as I say, it's really easy to get on people's calendar and get their time. So how you get like a mentor, or turn that mentor into a sponsor, I think is, once you've gotten the time, to make really great use of it. Like, be curious, or have an interesting discussion that you've thought about, like, or that that you want to get the person's point of view on something. If you can make that time with an interesting and well shared time, I think that's how you turn a mentor into a sponsor. So the first step is ask, absolutely. And again, you referenced it. It is like, it's a matter of personal fit as well. But being conscientious of having that time be robust once you do get the time.
No, I think that's really important. It doesn't necessarily have to have a label on it.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
right? And
Oh,
people love talking about themselves. So that's always,
yeah.
I found that when I've
Yeah.
needed advice too, that's always a great place to ask. But I think your point, Maria, of coming with a specific question or challenge to kick
Mhm.
off the conversation without even saying, hey, will you be my mentor to do this? Just
Yeah.
ask them the question and it
Yeah.
naturally
Yeah.
evolves.
Yeah. And I think like if you're in an organization, um, asking, whoever it is, like, where do you see us in 3 years and how can I play a part of that? Like if you're lacking a like a starting question, I think that's always a good one because first of all, it's so easy to get sucked into the day to day. So if anyone's asking me, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? Oh my gosh, that's so fun. Like I love that. And then how can I be a part of that is shows like some amazing initiative and also gets the person's wheels turning. Yeah, I think
I love that. I've gotten so many great lessons personally throughout this conversation as well, which I always do when we talk, which is amazing. My final question, because I know we're running out of time, is do you have any parting thoughts, words of wisdom to leave our audience with?
okay. Well, one thing I wanted to share, and it's a story that I've shared with you, and we've talked about is you know the request to people is to help a peer or anyone um, push themselves. And I'll root it in a story that I know I've shared with you. And the story is when I was a senior in high school, I was applying to colleges, and at the time, Stanford I think was $60 to apply, and I didn't have that money. My high school counselor, Mrs. Haneda, said, "Why aren't you applying to Stanford?" I was like, I don't have that money, and besides, I will never get in. And so she said, "Well, I can get you a low income fee waiver and you can apply for free." So I said, "Sure, I'll do it if it's free." And as I said, like I did get in, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And so she changed the trajectory of my life by believing in me, seeing a possibility for me that I wasn't seeing for myself, and helping make that happen. So my request to people is always help, like if you can or you find yourself in a situation where you can help somebody see a possibility for themselves that they're not seeing, to be a part of that, to help them along the way, because it's like, again, going back to where we started, planting a seed and you're helping nurture it, and you don't know how it's going to grow.
I love that. And I think that is exactly where we should end. Beyond inspiring, love hearing the stories, Maria. You are an incredible role model for so many of us. And I am excited to see you continue to grow as an executive and a leader. Thank you for celebrating you, which happens to be during Hispanic Heritage Month.